6 times. In 4 decades of professional drag racing, NHRA officials had to stop everything, call emergency meetings, and completely rewrite their rulebook. Not because of safety concerns, not because of some catastrophic accident, but because of one man, a quiet college professor from Minnesota, who treated drag racing like a math problem that needed solving. His name was Warren Johnson, and between 1984 and 2003, he forced the most powerful racing organization in America to change their rules 6 separate times, not by breaking them, not by bending them, but by reading them better than the people who wrote them. This is the story of how he did it, why NHRA couldn't stop him, and why, deep down, they secretly didn't want to. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how Warren exploited 6 different loopholes. You'll understand why they called him the professor, and you'll see why modern pro stock racing exists the way it does today, all because of what this one man discovered in the rulebook. But first, you need to understand why a college degree in drag racing was the most dangerous weapon Warren Johnson ever carried. Because the first time he made NHRA rewrite the rules, they didn't even realize he'd outsmarted them until it was already too late. The professor. 1971, Pomona Raceway, California. Warren Johnson shows up to his first NHRA national event. He's driving a beat-up Chevy 2, hauling it on a borrowed trailer. And while every other driver in the pits is rolling in with grease-stained t-shirts, coolers full of beer, and decades of garage experience, Warren Johnson steps out with something nobody expected, an engineering degree, and a briefcase full of calculations. See, Warren wasn't like the other racers. He'd actually gone to college, studied engineering, even taught it part-time at a technical school in Minnesota. And when he looked at drag racing, he didn't see it the way everyone else did. Most racers approach it like this. Try something, see if it works, adjust, repeat. Trial and error. Feel, experience, gut instinct. Warren approached it like a textbook problem. Variables, constants, rules, and most importantly, loopholes. He was methodical, quiet, the kind of guy who'd spend 3 weeks analyzing one paragraph in a rulebook, while other guys were out there testing 5 different carburetor setups. And that patience, that obsessive attention to detail, that's what earned him the nickname that would define his entire career. The professor. Now, at first, it was almost mocking. Other racers would joke about it. Oh, here comes a professor with his calculator. But Warren didn't care, because while they were laughing, he was reading every word of the NHRA Pro Stock Rulebook, every subsection, every technical specification, every single comma. And he noticed something the rulebook writers hadn't considered. They were writing rules to control what racers couldn't do, but they weren't being specific enough about what racers could do. And in that gap, between what was forbidden and what was permitted, Warren Johnson found an entire world of possibilities. He once said in an interview, "Racing isn't about luck. It's about reading what allowed and maximizing what's possible within those parameters." And that philosophy, that engineer's mindset, that's what led to rule change number 1. 1984. Warren Johnson walked into NHRA Tech Inspection with a camshaft that would change pro stock racing forever. And here's the crazy part. According to every rule in the book, it was completely, totally, 100% legal camshaft. Rule change number 1, 1984. Picture this. Bob Glidden is dominating pro stock. The guy's won 4 championships in a row. Factory teams from GM, Ford, and Chrysler are pouring millions of dollars into their programs. And Warren Johnson? He's running a small shop in Minnesota, building engines by himself, struggling to even qualify for some races. So he does what any good engineer would do when they're losing. He stops trying to outmuscle the competition and starts looking for the edges they've missed. He pulls out the NHRA rulebook, Pro Stock Engine Specifications. And there it is, clear as day. Maximum camshaft lift, 0.550 inches. Simple rule, right? Except Warren has a question. A question nobody else bothered to ask. Measured where exactly? See, a camshaft lifts the valve. But the measurement can change depending on the angle you measure from, the point on the valve stem you reference, even the rocker arm ratio you're using. And the rule book didn't specify any of that. Just said maximum lift, 0.550 inches. So Warren does the math. He designs a camshaft that, when measured the way he interprets the rule, comes in at exactly 0.550 inches. But because of the valve angle and rocker geometry he's using, the effective lift, the actual distance the valve opens, is closer to 0.620 inches. He installs it, fires up the engine, and suddenly he's making 200 more horsepower than he was the week before. Next race, Gainesville. Warren qualifies second, wins his first round, wins his second round, takes the whole event, first national event win of his career. Next race, Columbus, wins again. Next race, Englishtown, wins again. 3 races in a row. And now, people are paying attention. Bob Glidden's crew chief is suspicious. Other teams start whispering. Something's not right with Johnson's engine. So NHRA does what they always do when someone starts winning too much. They tear down Warren's engine after the next race, pull the camshaft, measure with their own tools, their own gauges, their own tech inspectors standing right there. And you know what they find? Nothing. Absolutely nothing illegal. The camshaft measures 0.550 inches. Exactly what the rulebook allows. But here's the problem. Warren's beating factory teams. He's beating racers with 10 times his budget. And he's doing it with something that's technically legal, but clearly against what NHRA intended when they wrote the rule. So NHRA has 3 options. 1. Admit their rulebook was poorly written. 2. Disqualify a driver who hasn't actually broken any rules and deal with the lawsuit that would follow. Or 3. Rewrite the rulebook. They picked option 3. 2 weeks later, NHRA releases a technical bulletin. New rule. Camshaft lift will be measured at the valve stem, perpendicular to the valve centerline, with the rocker arm at full lift, maximum 0.550 inches. Specific, detailed, no more wiggle room. Warren's response? He shrugged, went back to his shop, rebuilt the camshaft to the new specifications, and kept racing. No complaints, no protests, no public statements, because he'd already found loophole number 2. And this one would take NHRA 4 full years to even notice what he was doing. Rule change number 2, 1992. 1988 to 1992. For years. And during that time, Warren Johnson didn't just win races. He dominated pro stock like nobody had before. He won 18 national events in those 4 seasons. Made 5 final rounds in a row at one point. And the wildest part? He was doing it with technology that was sitting right there in plain sight the whole time. Cylinder heads. Now, here's what you need to understand about pro stock in the late 80s. NHRA's rules said you had to use a stock cylinder head casting, meaning the basic shape and structure of the head had to come from a production car. You couldn't just make your own from scratch. Made sense. It kept costs down, kept the racing close. But here's what the rule didn't say. It didn't say anything about what you could do to the inside of those ports, the intake runners, the chambers. As long as the outside casting was stock, you could modify the internal flow paths however you wanted, as long as you stayed within the maximum port volume limits. And Warren? He'd just gotten access to something most racers didn't even know existed yet. Computer flow modeling software. While other teams were grinding ports by hand, using trial and error, Warren was running simulations, testing digital versions of port shapes, analyzing airflow patterns, calculating velocity changes down to the thousandth of an inch. And he found something. By reshaping the port, not making it bigger, just changing the curve, the angle, the transition, he could increase airflow by 28% without changing the port volume at all. He built the heads, bolted them on, and suddenly, his engines were making power that didn't make sense to anyone watching. 1992 season starts. Warren wins Pomona, wins Gainesville, wins Houston, wins Englishtown. 7 wins out of the first 10 races. It wasn't even close. Bob Glidden's losing to him. Darrell Alderman's losing to him. Factory-backed Dodge teams with unlimited budgets are getting destroyed by this guy from Minnesota running out of a 2-car garage. So the complaints start rolling in. And NHRA listens. After Warren wins his 5th race of the season, they pull him into tech inspection, tear the engine completely apart, measure the cylinder heads with precision instruments, check the port volumes, check the valve sizes, check every single dimension in the rulebook, and everything's legal. Every measurement, every spec, perfectly within the rules. They send him on his way. He wins the next race. They pull him in again. Same process. 3 hours of inspection. Nothing illegal. 5 times. NHRA tore down Warren Johnson's engine 5 separate times in 1992. And 5 times, they couldn't find a single rule violation. But here's the thing. Warren Johnson was making NHRA look incompetent Million-dollar factory programs were getting beat by a guy who'd read the rule book better than they wrote it. And that wasn't just embarrassing. It was threatening the entire credibility of pro stock as a competitive class. So in June of 1992, middle of the season, NHRA does something they almost never do. They issue an emergency rule change, effective immediately. Cylinder head intake ports must maintain production port dimensions and angles. Port matching and gasket matching are permitted, but port reshaping beyond production configuration is prohibited. Warren had to scrap 8 sets of cylinder heads. Heads he'd spent months developing. Heads that cost him over $40,000 to machine and test. Just gone. Illegal overnight. You know what his response was? A reporter asked him about it after the rule change. Warren just smiled and said, "That's racing. Rules change. You adapt." No anger. No public complaints. No protest to NHRA. Because he'd already moved on to the next thing. And this next one? It was so simple, so obvious, that when NHRA finally figured out 3 years later, they were genuinely embarrassed they'd missed it for that long. Rule change number 3, 1991. While NHRA was busy rewriting cylinder head rules and patting themselves on the back for finally closing Warren's loophole, the professor had already moved on to something else. Something everyone could see. Something sitting right there on top of the engine for anyone to look at. The carburetor. Now, pro stock in the early 90s still used carburetors. Fuel injection wasn't allowed yet, and NHRA had strict rules about carburetor specs. You could only use certain approved models, and the Venturi, the opening where air flows through, had a maximum size. The rule was clear: carburetor Venturi diameter, maximum 1.780 inches. Pretty straightforward, right? Can't make a hole bigger than 1.780 inches across. Except Warren asked himself a question, the same kind of question that had gotten him in trouble twice before. What does diameter actually mean? See, diameter is a measurement across a circle. But what if the Venturi isn't perfectly circular? What if it's oval? Warren pulls out his calipers, measures an oval-shaped Venturi, measures it left to right, 1.780 inches. Perfect. Measures it front to back, also 1.780 inches. Also perfect. But here's the thing about ovals. Even though the diameter measurements are the same, the total cross-sectional area, the actual amount of air that can flow through, is larger than a circle with the same diameter. 15% larger in Warren's calculations. So he machines a set of custom carburetors, Venturis shaped like ovals. And when NHRA tech inspectors measure them with calipers, they measure exactly 1.780 inches, because that's what they are, in both directions. Warren bolts them on. And just like that, he's got more airflow, more power, better throttle response. And he runs them for 3 full seasons. 1988, 1989, 1990. 3 years, dozens of races, multiple tech inspections. And nobody notices. Not NHRA, not his competitors. Nobody. Until 1991, when something unexpected happens. A racer named Tom Hoover buys one of Warren's old carburetors at an estate sale, takes it home, tears it down to see what Warren was doing. And that's when he sees it. The Venturi is not round. It's oval. Tom takes it to NHRA, shows them, and you can imagine the conversation in that tech trailer. Look at this. It's oval. Okay, but what's the diameter? They measure it. 1.780 inches. Exactly legal. But it's oval. That's not what we meant. Did the rule say it had to be round? Silence. Because no, the rule didn't say that. It just said maximum diameter. And Warren's carburetor met that specification. Perfectly. But intent matters. And clearly, the intent was that Venturi should be circular. And HR just never wrote that down. So here comes rule change number 3. New technical bulletin. Carburetor Venturi must be circular in cross-section. Diameter measured at all angles must be consistent and not exceed 1.780 inches. Warren gets the notice, reads it, builds new carburetors, keeps racing. And once again, a reporter asks him about it. Warren, do you feel like NHRA is targeting you with these rule changes? His answer? I'm just following the rule book as it's written. If they want something specific, they need to specify it. That's what rules are for. And that answer? That calm, logical, completely reasonable answer? It drove NHRA absolutely insane. Because by now, you'd think they'd have learned their lesson. You'd think they'd start being more careful about how they wrote their rules. But Warren Johnson wasn't done, and his rivalry with Bob Glidden was about to explode into the most controversial rule change of all. The Glidden War. Rule change number 4, 1995. By 1995, this wasn't just racing anymore. This was personal. Warren Johnson versus Bob Glidden, the professor versus the king of pro stock. And these two men, they respected each other's skills. They acknowledged each other's talent. But trust? Zero. Absolutely zero trust. Glidden had won 10 championships at this point. He was the most successful pro stock racer in history. And Warren? Warren was a guy who kept finding ways to beat him with what Glidden saw as technicalities and loopholes. So when Warren shows up to the Gator Nationals in Gainesville with a new engine, Glidden's watching. Close. First qualifying session. Warren runs a 6.98. Quickest pass of the session. Glidden qualifies second with a 7.02. Glidden walks over to Warren's pit. Stands there looking at the engine. Doesn't say anything at first. Just looks. Then he says, "That's not a stock block." Warren looks up. It's on the approved list. "You want to see the casting numbers?" "I don't care about casting numbers. That block's not right." And Glidden walks straight to the tech trailer, files a protest. Now, here's what Warren had done. He'd found a foundry, a company that makes engine castings, that was producing what they called stock replacement blocks. These were blocks that had the exact same external dimensions as factory blocks, same mounting points, same casting numbers, but they were made with modern casting techniques, better materials, stronger, more consistent, and technically, they were stock blocks. They just weren't made by GM in 1972. They were made by an aftermarket company in 1994. NHRA pulls Warren's engine, measures everything, checks the casting numbers against their approved list. And yeah, it's on there. It's legal. But now there's a problem. Because if Warren can use these aftermarket stock blocks that are stronger than actual factory blocks, what's stopping everyone else? And if everyone starts using them, are they really stock anymore? NHRA's got a decision to make. And for 3 hours, officials are in that tech trailer, arguing. Warren's sitting outside, calm as ever, reading a magazine, because he knows something they're all figuring out. He's legal, completely, totally, unquestionably legal, but he's also about to ruin the definition of stock block for everyone. So NHRA makes a choice. They let Warren run that weekend. He qualifies first, makes it to the semifinals, loses to Glidden, actually, which probably made Bob feel a little better. But 2 weeks later, here comes the technical bulletin. Engine blocks must be manufactured by the original equipment manufacturer or licensed production facilities. Aftermarket reproduction blocks, even if dimensionally identical, are prohibited effective immediately. Warren has to scrap his block program. But you know what else happens? 15 other teams who are starting to use the same blocks also have to scrap theirs. And now NHRA is getting angry phone calls from all of them. Why are you changing this rule? And NHRA can't exactly say, because Warren Johnson read the rulebook better than we wrote it, without sounding incompetent. So they just say, clarification of existing regulations. Warren's response to media? Nothing. Silence. He just goes back to his shop and starts working on the next thing. Because by now, it's not even about winning races anymore. It's about the puzzle, the challenge, the intellectual exercise of finding what everyone else missed. And what he found next, it involved the one part of the car he'd barely even touched yet, the transmission. And when NHRA finally figured out what he'd done, they couldn't believe it was that simple. Rule change number 5, 1998. 1998. Warren Johnson is 56 years old. Most racers his age are thinking about retirement. Warren? He's just getting smarter. NHRA's transmission rules specified exact gear ratios. First gear, 1.80. Second, 1.40. Third, 1.00. Fourth, 0.80. Locked in, non-negotiable. Except Warren noticed something. The rules specify the ratios, but not the spacing between them. So he builds a custom transmission. All legal ratios, but positioned differently inside the case. Optimized for his engine's power curve. Smoother shifts. Better acceleration between gears. Gains him 1/10.5 per run. He runs it for 8 months before crew chief Jim Yates figures it out. Warren, how are your shifts so clean? Warren just smiles. Good clutch management. But Jim protested NHRA. They inspect the transmission. All legal ratios. But the spacing? That's the trick. New rule. Transmission gear ratios must maintain OEM spacing and positioning. Warren rebuilds. Keeps racing. 5 down. 1 to go. Rule change number 6, 2003. By 2003, Warren's in his 60s. 32 years of professional racing. 97 wins. 6 championships. And one final trick, weight distribution. NHRA required 2,350 pounds minimum, but didn't specify where that weight had to be. Warren relocates everything he can toward the rear, battery to the trunk, fuel cell moved back, every component shifted. Car still weighs 2,350 pounds. Completely legal. But now, more weight over the rear tires. Better traction off the line. 800th improvement in the first 60 feet. Runs it all season. Makes multiple finals. Everyone's wondering how he's still this fast. NHRA finally measures weight distribution across the field. Warren's is completely different from everyone else's. Legal? Yes. In the spirit of the rules? No. Rule change number 6. Component locations within 2 inches of OEM. Weight distribution between 48 to 52% front to rear. Warren reads a bulletin, and 10 years later, he retires. 2013, after 42 years. 97 wins. 6 championships. 6 rule changes. Some said age caught up to him. Some said he lost his edge. But the truth? Warren Johnson had finally run out of loopholes. Or so everyone thought. Because what NHRA won't tell you is this. Those 6 rule changes weren't just about stopping Warren Johnson. They needed him to keep doing it. The real reason. Here's what NHRA doesn't want you to understand. They needed Warren Johnson. First, TV ratings. Warren versus Glidden was the highest rated era in pro stock history. Controversy sells. And Warren was controversial in the smartest possible way. Never broke a rule, but everyone thought he was getting away with something. Second, innovation. Every loophole Warren found made NHRA's rulebook better. In 1984, the pro stock rulebook was 23 pages. By 2003, 127 pages of precise technical specifications. Warren forced them to become professional. Third, credibility. If NHRA had banned Warren, they'd admit their rulebook was so poorly written that one guy with an engineering degree could outsmart them. But by only changing rules going forward, they saved face. In 2015, a retired NHRA official told National Dragster, "Warren made us better at writing rules. We hated it then, but pro stock wouldn't exist in its current form without him." The final count, 97 wins, 6 championships, 6 rule changes, 0 disqualifications, 0 suspensions, 0 penalties. Warren Johnson never broke a rule. He just read them better than anyone in the sport's history. And here's what separates him from every other boundary pusher in racing history. Smokey Yunick said, "Rules are for people who don't know how to think." He got banned from NASCAR. Grumpy Jenkins said, "If you're not cheating, you're not trying." He spent half his career in tech inspection fights. Warren Johnson said, "I don't bend rules. I read them. If you want me to stop, write a better rule." That's the difference. Warren's approach was about precision, respect for the written word, understanding that rules aren't obstacles, they're the framework you compete within. And if you read that framework better than everyone else, you earn the advantage. His legacy? Today's NHRA Pro Stock Rulebook is 180 pages. It specifies camshaft measurement procedures, defines circular for carburetors, lists approved engine manufacturers, dictates transmission spacing, requires weight distribution checks. Warren Johnson directly influenced 40% of current pro stock rules. And the irony? NHRA now invites him to consult on new regulations. The same organization that spent 20 years closing his loopholes now asks him to help write rules. Because nobody understands that rulebook better than the professor. He retired in 2013, teaches at racing schools now, consults for teams. And when students ask, "How do you find loopholes?" his answer, "You don't look for loopholes. You read what's written and ask, what does this actually allow? Not what you think it means. What does it actually say?" That's the lesson. Don't cheat. Don't bend rules. Just read better than everyone else. At his Hall of Fame induction in 2013, Warren said, "I never cheated. I just read better than most people write." 6 words. That's his legacy. But here's the question nobody's asking. Warren, the Professor, Johnson. 6 times he made NHRA rewrite their rulebook. 6 times they couldn't disqualify him. 6 times he proved intelligence beats horsepower. One more time. Camshaft measurement, 1984. Cylinder head ports, 1992. Carburetor venturi shape, 1991. Engine block sourcing, 1995. Transmission spacing, 1998. Weight distribution, 2003. 6 rule changes. For decades, one man. But here's what nobody's asking. Is there a number 7? In 2019, Warren consulted for a pro stock team. 6 months later, NHRA quietly updated their ignition timing regulations. No announcement, no explanation, just a quiet mid-season rule change. Coincidence? Maybe, but knowing Professor, probably not. If you want more stories about racers who outsmarted NHRA, innovations that changed drag racing, and legends who refuse to accept limits, subscribe. Because Warren Johnson wasn't the first to challenge the rulebook, and he definitely wasn't the last.